Hey, welcome. We spend so much of our time thinking about our bodies, what we eat, how we look, how we feel. But what about that part of us that isn't flesh and bone? Today, we're going to go on a bit of an inner journey. We're going to explore the powers of the soul, using some really profound spiritual ideas as our guide.
So let's just jump right in with a big one to get us thinking. Beyond your physical body, what are you really? Take a second. It's a huge question, for sure, but it's pretty much the key to unlocking a much deeper understanding of who we are.
So, to even begin to wrap our heads around that, our source material gives us this really powerful distinction. Our body, right, is made up of a bunch of physical elements, and anything that's put together eventually has to come apart. But our spirit, our soul, that's something else entirely. It's a single, non-physical essence, and because it's not made of parts, well, it can't be broken down.
And this quote from Abdul-Baha just nails it down perfectly. The spirit is everlasting and of God. This idea is the bedrock for everything we're about to dive into, this eternal, untouchable core of our being.
So how in the world do we get to know this eternal self? Well, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. First, we'll look at the absolute foundation, which is divine love. Then we'll get into how we build our own spiritual identity. After that, we'll talk about the tools we have for this journey. And finally, we'll explore our connection to the divine.
Let's start with the absolute foundation, the power source for the soul, love. But listen, this isn't just about romantic love or, affection for your friends. This is something way, way bigger.
The source actually defines love as a supreme magnetic force. And get this, the eternal breath that vivifieth the human soul. In other words, it's the very breath that gives life to the soul. So think of it less like an emotion and more like a fundamental force of the universe. Kind of like gravity, but for our souls. It's what pulls us toward God and binds everything together. It's the real animating power of our spirit. This leads us to a really beautiful and powerful metaphor. Our soul is like a mirror. When it's polished and pure, free from all the static and distractions of the world, it can perfectly reflect that divine magnetic love. The potential to reflect that light is always there. Our job is just to keep the mirror clean. All right, so let's move on and see how this all builds into our spiritual identity. If love is the foundation, then you can think of our virtues and our deeds as the bricks and mortar we use to construct who we truly are. Now, this is a really important point, the difference between virtues and deeds. Virtues, things like kindness, justice, humility, they're described as our share of God's own attributes. They're about who we are deep down. Deeds, on the other hand, are what we do. They're our actions, hopefully driven by pure motives. It's the combination of our being and our doing that really forges our spiritual identity. But here's the thing. These virtues aren't just handed to us. They're refined and they're strengthened through our life experiences. It happens through our own efforts, through serving other people, and even through the tests and the really tough challenges we face. It's this active, ongoing process of polishing these qualities until they become a permanent part of who we are. And this quote, wow, it just paints such a powerful picture of why this all matters so much. Our body is just a temporary cage. When the bird of our soul is finally freed, it carries with it everything it has built, all those virtues and deeds. That is our true self. That's the identity that actually lasts. Okay, so we're building the spiritual identity. But what tools do we actually have for this journey? What do we use to polish that mirror? The source highlights 2 absolutely critical ones, our intellect and our free will. So let's talk about intellect, because the definition here is so much richer than what we normally think. It's not just about being book smart. It's a 2-part power. First, there's the mind, the part that gathers facts and uses logic. But then there's our inner vision, that intuitive, creative part of us that lets us see connections, to reflect, and to just know things. And here's how they're meant to work together. The mind does the groundwork, right? It gathers all the information. Then our inner vision takes a look at all those pieces and starts to see the pattern, the bigger picture. And when these 2 things work in harmony, that's when we get the power of true discernment, of real understanding. All right, now for free will. And this is a fascinating distinction. The source says that in our physical life, we don't really have free will. We don't choose our parents, where we're born, or our basic circumstances. But in our spiritual life, we have complete freedom. We get to choose moment by moment whether to turn the mirror of our soul towards the divine light or to turn it towards darkness. That choice is 100% ours. And this brings us to our final section, the powers that actually forge and maintain that divine connection. We're talking about faith and prayer.
So let's look at faith. The source material is super clear on this. This is not about blind belief. Real faith is a combination of two things. First, conscious knowledge, really understanding. And second, putting that knowledge into practice through good deeds. It's an active, informed way of being.
And the power of that kind of faith has a direct result. This quote points to a perfect equilibrium. The strength of our faith directly corresponds to the powers and blessings in our lives. This is the balance. This is the balance. You can just feel the weight of that, right? It's like a spiritual law of cause and effect. And finally, we have prayer. It's described as the food for the soul, which is such a perfect way to put it. It's what nourishes our spiritual selves. It's the tool we use to reestablish our connection with God. When we feel lost or disconnected, prayer is like our golden compass, helping us find our true north again. So, let's bring all this together. Your true self, your heavenly identity, isn't some vague, foggy concept. It's the sum of all these incredible powers. The love that is your foundation, the virtues you work to refine, the deeds you perform, the intellect you use to understand, the will you exercise, the faith you build, and the prayer that connects you to it all. So what does all this create in the end? The source leaves us with this one last powerful metaphor. All of our choices, our actions, our virtues, they're all coming together to create the book of our life, a unique story that no one else in the world could ever write. Which leaves us with one final and maybe the most important question. As you continue on your journey, as you keep shaping your own spiritual identity, what is the book of your life saying?